Sure. Yeah. I don't always really consider myself much of an artist per se, but happy to share some of the background as to kind of how I stumbled into base paint all those years ago at this point. So I was probably one of many people that it was introduced into crypto back in 2021 through the explosion of non fungible tokens and NFTs. And a friend of mine uh, that I had made acquaintances through a project called Creature World. Um, Him and I had worked on some other projects in the past, and through communication and just looking for new and exciting things that were being done in the crypto space, he had pointed me in the direction of Basepaint. It was probably day 8 or maybe day 9 of this project, and pretty much ever since I've been pretty well hooked on the concept and the structure. My background isn't really in art or traditional illustrations or anything of that nature. So this was a really fun kind of way to share in a lot of the creativity and the work that was being done in a way that I really don't think would be possible anywhere else. So, yeah, so early on, it was really just a friend that was really also a really big advocate of this project in the early stages that said, "Hey, you should check this out." And um, honestly, ever since, it's been a great project to watch it, kind of develop through the years and see how things change and things like that. But yeah, background wise, not too much. Maybe considered a creative a bit, but not too much of an artist. So I was just like to try to build more skill and practice through a lot of these base paint canvases throughout the years. Yeah, that's right. So I'm in the space more focused on finance in the real world. Not to maybe disclose too much of my own personal information, but I'm very far away from illustration, drawing, artwork generation, or really anything of that nature. This is kind of a more so of a hobby of mine that I've picked up over the years, and kind of a reprieve from work in many ways, just to be able to do something a little different and a little bit more creatively expressive as well. Yeah, I think I was introduced around day 6 or 7 and got my first brush. I think maybe day 9 or 10, if my memory serves me right. So he's not. No, he. I think he probably made it somewhere to. Oh gosh, he probably made it somewhere today 40 or 50 before something that I think happened pretty commonly for a lot of those people in the first, let's call it surge of contributors was a bit of a burnout. There's kind of this pressure to contribute every single day, and it kind of became a little more burdensome for some versus others. So, although to my knowledge, he's still, you know, watches and monitors the project in general to see whether he'd want to contribute or purchase canvases as they're generated. But he's no longer really as active, nearly as active as I would say as I am at this stage. No, I wouldn't say it was an expectation as far as like the project, pushed, but I think it's a natural thing to have some pressure to. So as you know, with the project, every pixel you add is added to the pool of the compensation that you're provided, proportionate to how much you contribute in the thing. So there is a little bit of this pressure to use all of your pixels every day because you're rewarded more so by the number of pixels that you draw, not necessarily the novelty or creativity of that. So in the early days, we dealt with a lot of people, spamming the canvas with their brushes, just drawing nonsense and scribbles, and and you had people that were actually quite creative, adding pieces to the project as well. But I think those people, on occasion, would get a little burdened by, the pressure of keeping the streak going or keeping that payment going to the maximum effect as they could. just kind of maybe a natural inclination of some people in crypto farming projects and things like that. So um, I don't know if that makes any more sense. It wasn't something explicitly trying to be pushed upon the creatives within Basepaint, but it was just maybe a natural byproduct of how the project worked a little bit. And I think at this stage, I mean, we're well past that point to what I see day to day as far as who's contributing, and you can tell by the quality of the canvas now versus the first few days, especially, but first few months and maybe even the first year. But there's been definitely some natural transitioning as time has gone on with the project. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just in this space that's very tied to money and artwork. I think there's an element of lost opportunity if not using the entire paintbrush. If you had 1,000 pixels and you only use 500, well, you kind of left half of the financial element on the table for each of those days. So I think, and again, I don't think that's the case so much anymore as it was in those very early days. But in those early days, it was very much more common to see pretty well everybody who had a brush use 100% of their brush. Nowadays, it's a little bit more towards the artistic work and kind of cohesion of a canvas. But yeah, I think again, the crypto element adds a monetary element into the artwork in a way that I think is very unique, and so it attracted, certainly in the early days, a pretty unique creative group alongside people just simply trying to profit through crypto. Yes, yeah, I'm not doing this for a living. This isn't my full time job. This is really just a hobby that just so happens to have some portion of crypto compensation to it. But yeah, it's much more for me. It's kind of been about just doing cool things, helping the community, and yeah, trying to leave an impression in some way or another that's positive and hopefully somewhat inspiring to others. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so kind of yeah, my record. Where am I on the leaderboard of some of the base paint statistics? I don't have a streak. I'm currently sitting on a single day streak only because I just contributed to this most recent day. um, so I've been one that, I don't know, I'm kind of hit or miss with some of the streak work. Just it's very cool to have that record to show you've committed, almost 800 to, excuse me, almost 850 days to this point. If you were one of those very, very few people that started from the very beginning and haven't missed a day. But for me personally, I've much more, like I said, been one that enjoys just kind of finding opportunity to commit the stuff I like. Everybody, I think, over 850 days has their own phases. And so there were times where I would try to push a streak and get up as high as maybe the 80s or 90 days in a row on the canvas. But honestly, it wasn't as fulfilling or interesting to me to simply go for that leaderboard or scoreboard as much as it was kind of more fun to see how whatever I commit was modified, improved, or added to day by day when I did commit stuff that was a bit more, iconic, if you will. So no streak, nothing like that. That's all too impressive. I think right now I do sit on the top 20 as far as total pixels painted on it, but I think that mostly has to do with just the time that I've been here more than the full commits each day. And I genuinely, I think it's probably been at least 200 days, maybe more, since I have fully used my entire pixel paintbrush too. So I don't typically use all pixels. Certainly am in the group of leaving money on the table, but that's, like I said earlier, not really what it's about for me personally. Yeah, I think just to add one thing too. I mean, this is always the thing that I point to when people talk about crypto technology and kind of where it intersects with a lot of the more creative pieces. I think we're kind of inundated with a lot of gambling and speculation in the crypto coin market right now, and NFTs kind of feeling like a prior version of that, just hyper speculation of the space. But this is such a unique thing in that I don't think there's any other way to create something like Basepaint without crypto, and I don't think it would be able to be done in any way besides with crypto. So whenever people talk about the advantages of this new technology and the way this works, I mean, this is like, to me, the prime example of where a lot of really cool things intersect. It's sustainable, it's equitable for everybody at the amount that they want to commit to this, and it actually has a product at the end of the day, a byproduct that's created that has so much character and charm, and there are eras of different types of artists adding to these things over literal years at this point. So um, yeah, as much as I say it's a hobby, I don't mean to downplay it at all. I think this is probably one of the most, even as popular as it may be, underrated projects in all of crypto. Um, yeah, Basepaint is a collective group of digital creators, all painting and contributing on one canvas with one single line of information as far as direction goes, and and that's pretty much it. I mean, it's a group of collective people painting on a canvas that are then sold, and the profits of those sales are, I guess, shared with the creatives that make it every single day on repeat, automated, and in a space that allows people across the world to contribute to with very limited barriers to entry. Yeah, so initially I believe I had 500. I think those that was the amount that I was given when I started, and I currently have 5,000. So I've had 5,000 since maybe day 50 or so, somewhere around there, um, and I've had that same amount pretty well since then. If everything crypto was more like base paint, I would be 100% for crypto. I am probably not so anti as Jude is or mentioned to you was. But I think I probably fall somewhere to say, I think it's got a lot of potential. I think right now a lot of its potential is being squandered. Personally, I don't find too much all that interesting with gambling and speculation of value through the pure attention economy. That's just not that interesting to me personally. I've seen it done. Yeah, not so much necessarily a hate for crypto, but definitely it's a bit tiring, and not a whole lot new is really exciting me in the space. Um, Outside of outside of things like this, outside of I could name probably one or two other things that even pique my interest anywhere near this level of innovation and design, and just clean design and done. And that's to the point of what I said earlier about why this is the project I mention whenever I talk about it, talk about crypto in general, is because it is such a good example of what can actually be done in the space that goes beyond just speculating whether a coin will become more valuable or less valuable in a month, a week, a day, a year, or whatever. So yeah, so I think I'm certainly more pro crypto, but than con. But I do think that it's because of projects like this more so than the general optimism of again the more profiting mindset. Again, I'm a big advocate for this thing. So when I'm not sure who, I think it might have been CM reached out to me. I certainly wanted to help any way I could, because I think things like this I deserve a little bit more of the spotlight, although not always the most, amazing ROI for farmers and things of that nature. I mean, you can't deny the persistence of this project. I mean, there's not a whole lot of things to compare it to. So there's a couple of different projects that were somewhat similar. especially right when Basepaint came out. I think there was an idea that this was a really fun and cool design and idea, and so I think there was some people trying to replicate it with their own kind of impression and style within it. Be it, instead of instead of it being a wiped and new canvas every day, there was one to my memory that was the same canvas for a month, but quite a bit larger. So giving people a little bit more freedom to do more longer sitting uh, artwork and contributions over the span of days instead of simply 24 hours to create things. That project's name's escaping me at the moment. I hate that I don't remember what it is, but most of these projects haven't had the persistence of users and creatives that seem to come back to base paint day after day. But yeah, there's a couple of smaller projects in comparison to base paint that kind of tried and have been probably working on doing similar things, but um, for one reason or another, traction just wasn't the same for those. Yeah, I haven't heard of anything following the same principles of base paint, but trying a different medium of art or collaborative work. Having a bunch of random people come together to help build code that can then be sold to the mass, or music, or even just simply a different version of artwork, be it something that's not pixel oriented, but rather maybe something a little bit more detailed, or what have you. I haven't heard of anybody else doing that, but I think it does absolutely lend the opportunity to do so. I think the measurability of some of those different um, mediums is probably a little more difficult than the pixel art, because the pixel art is pretty mathematical. I mean, it's pretty easy to track exactly what and who did what, in comparison to writing a song collaboratively, or contributing productive code, or some other type of valuable asset that could then be sold day by day. But yeah, if you know of any, heck, let me know. I'd be happy. I think I may have mentioned this, but I might not have too. Initially, finding this project was me reaching out to those group of friends that I mentioned, asking, "Hey, what is anybody doing that's exciting or fun or interesting right now within the space?" And that's when ultimately my friend had mentioned to me and told me to check this thing out. So I'm always one to kind of try to pursue some of the newer and exciting projects or approaches that people try to have to make the space as interesting and compelling as possible. Oh yeah, sure. So I mean, I have a good deal of admiration for all sorts of different projects that go beyond just simply you, you know recycling what people have done in the past. I really enjoyed. So DX Terminal was the project, which you may be familiar with, but it was ultimately an attempt at generating and running a mass of artificial intelligence agents all within the same ecosystem on a fake marketplace that you could prompt your AI agents um, to do things to make you more or less profitable within the space. And there's all sorts of mechanisms. If you don't know about it, or didn't hear about it when it came out, go check out the DX terminal. Um, that in and of itself, the artificial intelligence agents that you could independently prompt and persuade to do things on your behalf, was a novel and fun idea. But in addition to that, what I thought was very interesting was the overlay of the artwork created by Gremplin, who you may be familiar with, being a bit of the Nouns history background. He did a lot of the artwork behind the profiles or the agent's image as people saw them and as they interacted with this program. So that was, to me, something that was very unique, and I still haven't seen anybody do before. I know they talked about it being one of the largest artificial intelligent agent ecosystems created, which I thought was really fascinating, even though it was a bit novel in a way that wasn't really for necessarily profiting off of what your agents did. It was more just an experiment that I really had a lot of respect for. I'm a big fan of terraforms, a big fan of a lot of Gremplin's artwork too. So the toads and things of that nature, I've always had some admiration for that approach in the peak of, false promises of 2021's NFT era, seeing something so simple like the toads being dropped with really no promise or assurance of anything was refreshing at the time as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, there's a handful of projects that I think are really cool. Manny's might be another one that you're familiar with, or people are familiar with. That's a uh, little low profile, I guess, or not always marketed heavily, but they're a pretty interesting group of people, very smart people within that community. And the project itself was a bit uh, fun and silly, but has definitely kind of built a little bit of uniqueness to it too that I think is really interesting. But I think most of this is for base paint, so I don't want to go down any of those rabbit holes necessarily too much. But yeah, I mean, there's a handful of things that definitely have piqued my interest, and I think a lot of it comes from novelty and uniqueness more so than awareness, profitability, scale, things like that that are just the big money makers that may make headlines. Don't often interest me as much as some of these others that also may get a lot of attention, but definitely are more warranted for that attention too. Yeah, Manny's is a guy 3D scanned himself into a computer pretty well and made a 3D model of himself and then sold them as NFTs, which seems a little odd and funny, but at the time it was interesting, a little different. And, I think there's a lot of things that longer term Manny's could probably speak to way better than I could, but it's just kind of a funny project, more nothing taken too seriously, but also some very intelligent and some people I look up to in that space in that community as well, which is a part of it, especially the older NFT era. There was a lot of community building at the time, and I think that was just one that seems to be continuing to stand the test of time. Yeah, yeah. So when yeah, it was just kind of one of those points in time. I think it was starting to become the lulls of some of the 2021 era, post the biggest of booms back then, where I just kind of reached out to some groups, said, "Hey, what are people doing that's actually fun or exciting or seems unique or interesting?" And yeah, and so a friend of mine said, "Hey, you should totally check this thing out. This is really cool. It mixes a lot of cool things together, and yeah, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but you should check it out." So I did, and that was pretty much where it all kicked off. I was super grateful. I was hooked immediately on this project. Like from day one, I was like, how do I get more pixels? How do I collaborate more? How can I make bigger things? How do I work with the community that's here to help me make really fun and cool things? And yeah, and that's kind of what happened. Um, why do I like the project so much? I think I like it so much because there's not really anywhere else on the internet where you can so directly participate with some of the like most creative and talented people within, I would say, this kind of space. Like if I were to ask somebody, "Hey, I drew this thing. Would you mind modifying it and making it look a little taller or funnier or animate it in some way?" Most people are gonna, ask you to pay them or do some work or whatever, and then ultimately it's only going to be seen by me and that one other person. So I think there's something just really cool about having 100 really talented people all sharing one canvas together and then all kind of making their own touch on the canvas, and that just being every new day being a theme or an idea recommended, a direction given on the canvas that is new and refreshing, that's just something voted on by the people that are there. So kind of deciding on what the next canvas wants to be, whether it's something a bit more calm and mellow or something a bit more intense. There's all sorts of different styles as you scroll through the gallery on the Basepaint website to see that there's just not really anything else like it out there. And so, I mean, even in those early days, it felt that way, where occasionally you'd get your thing, whatever you contributed to the canvas, just drawn over. But then occasionally people would just make it better, whatever it was, or you would just see it at the end. And, that's a cool thing too, that it's kind of just imprinted on this project forever. So yeah, lots of cool things. But I think those are the things that come to mind immediately when I think about, why I like the project so much. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a part of like who doesn't want to participate in something like bigger than themselves, I suppose. So there's a little bit of that. And I growing up, I always liked to doodle. I would draw on napkins waiting for breakfast with my dad at restaurants. So there was always kind of this little bit of enjoyment of the collaborative art where, you draw a circle and then they draw a nose and then you draw the ears and et cetera, et cetera. And it's a fun thing to do and kind of share and shared artwork. And so I've always enjoyed that kind of creative piece, although I don't do it professionally. And so I think that's just kind of where some of that bleeding came from. I've worked on other projects prior to Base Paint and just helped with kind of more community based, you know, fun stuff, be it, making memes for projects like Creature World or trading cards for the Mannies. It's just fun doing little things to kind of give back and collaborate with the communities that have been built over time. And I feel like that's just what Base Paint is too, in a better way in a lot of ways too. Yeah, it was always fun. It's a fond memory of childhood for sure. Just doing those little things is, I think a lot of people did, maybe not, but just that kind of shared artwork drawn between two or three people. You pass a piece of paper around or whatever. That's always been fun for me. Yeah, it's a derivative of a derivative probably at this point. Um, yeah, so that yeah, a lot of my profile stuff is still Creature World based. I really enjoyed Creature World back in 2021, and I still enjoy it and have some admiration for all the stuff that they did and tried to do as well. But yeah, it's a there was a period of time where somebody had created some derivative of the Creature World project, and I think I want to say his name was Chad or something like that. But he was that kind of stereotypical meme, strong jawed, uh, big guy look, and so I created a version of the Creature World from that, and I think it was Vinny from Letters actually then recreated it with his kind of charm to it, and I think that's the one I have right now. But yeah, it's just a little silliness, a little nonsense, but that's kind of the fun of some of this more creative stuff too. Base paint would have been the first pixel art experience. The others were more just, kind of, um, they were a bit more all over the place, to be honest with you. But yeah, base paint was the first pixel art kind of exposure that I had or did. And you can kind of tell, I mean, if you go way back to some of my very first commits on those early days, it's, Space Invaders on the side of a computer or, kind of very basic single tone pixel art work. Whereas I'd like to think I've gotten a little better over a couple of years of doing this, but even still, I'm always impressed by others far exceeding my skill set as well. Yeah, happy to. Yeah, happy to talk about some of the maturity or maturing of the canvases over time, because right out of the gate I think it was something everybody was excited for. Access to paintbrushes were just simply, go to the website, request a brush, and you'll get 100 pixels that you could add to the canvas. That's pretty well open to the masses. And so, as you might imagine, we had, hundreds upon hundreds, maybe even thousands of people committing a very small amount of pixels to each canvas. And like I mentioned earlier too, some of those people were just spamming nonsense and just, trying to do it for the sake of getting a little bit of crypto back for what they put into it. But others were already at those early stages making really cool and fun things. So in the early days, it was a mix of just chaos and a few really talented creators. And then you kind of had people that were trying to just, keep the peace as well, clean up all the spam and clutter and just manage to try to make something a bit more cohesive. But obviously, in those early days, it was kind of every man for himself, and just add whatever you want and hope that it doesn't get drawn over, because there was far, far, far more pixels than there was space on the canvas. So very often you'd have a lot of overlap and people drawing on top of things, and it was a bit of a dog pile. And there was some charm to that chaos. I think personally, I think there was some fun looking back at that, especially at how different that was. But over time, a lot of people were granted and awarded larger and larger paintbrushes. So they were, the people that were doing the right things and not spamming the canvas or just wasting their pixels were gradually rewarded with more pixels as time progressed. And so you'd start to naturally see through that progress and that promotion, if you will. You would start to see more people making cool art and fewer spammers having as much pull on the canvas. So it was easier to clean up the spam and easier to clean up the mess, but still quite a bit of work to do so. And so let's see. So I'm thinking of the early days, or trying to rack my brain around some of that stuff. So in the early days as well, there wasn't any voting system even on what the canvases were going to be. It was the original creators that had made a list of, I'm sure they'll tell you, but not maybe more than 30 days, maybe 60 days. Um, and you could probably go actually into the gallery and see when that was. But regardless, it was a lot of systems not in place yet either. Like the way you look at the how everything is so cleanly designed and put together today with your paintbrush and the editing tools and all of that. Like there's so many more features today than those early days. So a lot of limiting factors for the creatives, even I think, on contributing things in those early days to really make this kind of stuff that you see today. So kind of transition maybe to the middle point of Basepaint, where we started doing a little bit of regulation of some of those bad actors in it, and started, banning brushes and limiting people that weren't actually contributing any artwork or communicating in the chat section of the project as well. So there's kind of an era of reducing the bad instead of enhancing or adding the good. And I think that really helped kind of clean up a lot of the clutter that kind of started in the early days. However, even in that time, the canvases were still kind of more what we'd call collage based, where it was just a little bit of every artist for themselves, all kind of going in their own creative direction, which looks a lot better than just clutter, but is still pretty chaotic and pretty hectic. And so I think that kind of final stage, or kind of maybe close to where we're at today, was the expansion of the canvas. So giving a lot of the creatives a lot more room to work, as they've all probably been given larger paintbrushes as well, and some ability to kind of coordinate really what people like versus what people have seen enough of. So meaning we've got hundreds and hundreds of that collage style canvas. Let's try to do something that's a bit more cohesive. Like today's a perfect example. Day 849, Project Genesis. It's a very cohesive project that you could see. And if you were told one person put that together, you'd probably believe them. And it's very stylized, and it's very, cohesive. Whereas you go back to day 100 as an example, and it's going to be a lot more chaotic. You can see a lot more different artists trying to make their signature point on whatever that is. So so it kind of changed from mass chaos to minor chaos to, I think we're pretty well close to max cohesion on a lot of these canvases more recently, which I think they all come with their own pros and cons. But personally, I like some of the cohesion, but I think just like those previous canvases, it will eventually start to get tiresome too. You kind of lose some of the independent charm when everything seems like only one artist is doing it, when in reality there's still over 100 people committing on most days of the base paint. So just as an example, yesterday there was 100 people that 100 separate paintbrushes, excuse me, contributing. 108 the day before, 105, etc. So it's not quite the same as those early days. If you go to day one as an example, it was somewhere over 600, I think. Oh no, sorry. Day three is really when it exploded up to 460, 300. It's not quite to 600, but like day nine, as an example, was over 768 people. I don't know what the max was, but there was a good period in the early days where hundreds and hundreds of people were committing. And so you can just imagine the type of chaotic energy that came day after day after day on the canvas. And I mean, I really think that was a fun era of base paint. But I think we've matured a lot in a lot of good ways too. Yeah, absolutely. So being someone that tries to remain anonymous, sometimes building a reputation as an anonymous person can be a challenge. So projects like this that sustain for so long and seeing those repeat people coming back day after day is a really cool thing for me, and I'm sure they would hopefully speak kindly about my contributions and the things I've done. But yeah, I think the people that have been here for a very, very long time definitely see something more than just simply adding, whatever piece of art and then leaving without really engaging the community or the group as a whole. I think a big piece of this is the collaboration, and that doesn't work without community. I think you just don't have that if there was no ability to communicate with each other, and naturally people are going to want to do that, and I think the project's better for it. I definitely, similar to Brave and other people, I look at this thing every single day, whether I commit something to it or not. I think it's a very common thing that people have this on a shortcut to just look and see what did everybody do today. Oh, that canvas is fun. Oh, I wouldn't have thought they'd do that with it. Oh wow, that one's really cool. That kind of thing. There's something to want to come back every single day because it's it's great artwork, and it's super fun, and you really have no idea what it's going to be until the next day. So it's very fun to just, whether it be every morning or every afternoon, to just check in on everybody, see how everything is. And it's a very kind group too. I mean, everybody's very positive and tries to be productive with what we talk about too. So I mean, yeah, it's fun. I mean, I think you don't do a lot of these things without community. So I'm glad that that is a feature for sure. Oh, um, I probably do. I'm just trying to think which ones I would say are favorites. So really, there's two, and let me see. So the first canvas, I think, is probably tied with the one other, but day 591 is probably my favorite or second favorite canvas, and it's the Decaying Couch. So it's 9 images set in a storyline where the top left one is the frame of the couch being built at a construction or craftsman's workshop, and then it slowly progresses to where the final image is it's falling apart in a junkyard and like rats are fighting on top of it or something. And it's kind of this really well balanced image that just shows a lot of character of the life of a couch. And I like this canvas a lot because it tells a story. But then what I really like too is that parts of this story have bled into a lot of other canvases. So real small, subtle things. But if you look closely at some of the other canvases, you'll see pieces that were created from this storyline in the other canvases. So it kind of bled out into, the whole base paint metaverse, if you will. Like there's a whole kind of shared universe amongst some of these canvases, and this one I think does a really good job at using a lot of the little fun details for it. So that's probably number one or maybe number two. The only other one I'd speak really highly of that I think is right up there with it is day 10, which was the Dune day. um, was one of the very first canvases. But I think what I like so much about day 10 was, like I mentioned earlier, this was in the era of base paint where it was pure pandemonium. It was chaos. And everybody was kind of doing their own thing and making their own stuff. And this was the first canvas that had any semblance of cohesion and direction. So I thought that was, especially at the time, and even more so looking back at it, like a really, really cool thing to be able to have literally 369 separate paintbrushes make an image that all kind of works together. As you know, as noisy as it is compared to the stuff we do now, like it was definitely the pioneer of the idea that all of these people could actually collaborate to make one like cohesive image versus, you know, chaos. So, so those are probably my top two, as far as, I mean, there's so many great canvases. Like I could list like my top 20 or 30, just scrolling through them. There's all sorts of ones in here that are just, I could look at forever. But those two, I think the kind of background story to them and how well they were done was, definitely what kind of made me think of them right out of the bat. Um, I don't think I have anybody specifically. I mean, again, yeah, Jude's great, Creamy's great, Bomba is awesome. I mean, the list goes on and on. And I think what I like a lot about the project too is like not even it's not so simply just the people that are the best artists that are doing the most or adding their own kind of charm to the project. Like you have people that are really good at suggesting new themes for future days that seem to really be fun and creative. There's the people that help with the direction of the canvases day by day, just simply saying, here's a concept we haven't done before, or here's an idea that might be fun or novel. And then, of course, yeah, you have the artists that are putting in like awesome, awesome contributions to each canvas day. Yeah, definitely some phenomenal stewards of the project. I think it's really cool that we've got people that are so passionate that they want to see the project continue as it has in the past. But I wouldn't say any. I don't have any. I think great stories as far as my interaction with one individual one. I'm sure there's been days where I've added stuff where people have rolled their eyes at me and said, Lotus, what are you thinking? And other days where it's appreciated, whether it be a theme proposal or it be a commitment or it's just the direction that I try to provide to the canvas. It's it's a huge project. I mean, I think it's really fun in that way, but I don't think I have any stories per se about this one time so and so said or did this or did that. If that makes sense. Yeah, that seems like a rumor to me. It's above my pay grade. Whatever some of that stuff is, I don't typically get into too much of that behind the scenes work. I do know there's some pretty cool and exciting stuff that's to come with the project. I know a lot of people are working on features to enhance the project and things like that that I think will be really interesting. So I'd hate to see that be created and then only 100 days left. So my hunch is that's a silly rumor, but who knows, honestly. Um, yeah, why do people collect? I mean, I think it's a couple of different things. I think they're, kind of back to the point of the whole crypto piece and the opportunity to profit. I think there are some speculators that like to purchase things that they have some expectation of it becoming more valuable in the future. I think that's a kind of the natural and probably the most common reason you see some collectors collect in mass. Um, but I think there's also a pretty big group at this point because there's so many canvases that it's a it's a thing of just, why do people buy any artwork, or why do people, buy music or buy albums and things like that. They enjoy looking, they enjoy listening, they enjoy, you know owning the thing that either they participated and created or that they just have some admiration towards the creators themselves. Um, so I think those are really big pieces. In the early days, I think there's something to say that's kind of cool to own the first of the many trading cards, as an example. It's a collectible in some ways too. There's only so many of day ones or day twos of the base paint project that's lasted years now. So I think that's another reason some people consider collecting, kind of like the same reason they collect trading cards. Personally, I really collect for two reasons. So one, because I like the artwork. I think the artwork is novel in some way or visually pleasing. And then the second reason is to share with other people. So occasionally when I do like a canvas so much, or I think there is a story as compelling as, the life of a couch, I'll buy multiple copies of it. And as I introduce people into why I think this project's so cool, or why I think there is something legitimately valuable being created here in this space, I love to share artwork in that same way that I do by creating it, but also by gifting it. So on occasion, I'll buy multiple canvases or mint my contribution and share with other people too. That's a fun thing to do with these kinds of things. Just giving people a small little gift to get them started or to get them, interested in these types of things that I enjoy doing with my free time. Yeah, I mean, I won't say I do that often, but yeah, there's definitely been days where I'm like, oh man, that's sweet. I'm gonna buy three of them because I know as soon as I can introduce this to somebody, that's the one I'll want to send to people because it's something that just who wouldn't want to have that kind of fun or cool thing or yeah, I mean, some themes you think about certain people too in your life, and then you think they might enjoy having a copy of this, in a real material way. Um, yeah. So yeah, anyways, that's something I kind of like to do personally. So all of the information I believe was saved on the blockchain. So if you go back today, um, I think you could go back to some of the earliest days and see the animation. I might be mistaken on that, but animations definitely become more popular as people's brushes have gotten larger and larger. Yeah, sure enough. So yeah, I'm on the website and I went to day two, and so you can go through and you can see every commit, every single one that happened on day two, and there's over 260 separate commits or people saving to the canvas. But effectively, it's on a timeline that is animated as well. But more recently, I think the animations have been kind of a part of the project in a way that they weren't in those early days. People are committing maybe not as big single pieces, but maybe a smaller piece that moves and waves their hand or interacts with something, pops in, pops out. So as we see the animated videos of the time lapse of what people are saving throughout the day, you can see those small animations that are kind of fun little, charming pieces of some creatives' approach. I'm terrible at animating, I think. So I don't do it very often, hardly ever. But but yeah, it's definitely something that's kind of hidden behind the canvas in a lot of ways. You don't see it when you just purchase a still image canvas. But as you go into the project and you go into the metadata, you can find all sorts of really fun little Easter eggs, I'd call them. No, not really. There's no real meaning behind the name. It's what I've used for, um, I don't know, probably 15 years now, 10 to 15 years. I've just had that as a name. I was never a fan of, adding numbers or spaces to names. And, in the era of everybody having a username, it's harder and harder to find unique and simple names. And I really don't know where it came from originally. um, I haven't thought of that scenario of what would happen if we had 100 more artists, and would it be better or worse to, snap our fingers and all of a sudden have a tremendous amount more of contributors. I think overall the canvas is better off for having more people committing to it. Um, I I don't really know though, but I'm thinking through this kind of in the moment. But I think one of the things that the project has a hard time with right now is a little bit of the pixel inflation. So meaning like the average person with a paintbrush has a lot more pixels than they did just a year ago. And so we see a little bit more of these larger commitments to the canvas that can be a little bit more dominant and controlling, that maybe snubs out other smaller creatives ideas and smaller commits to the canvas that really have the same charm that they may have a couple of years back. So I think to the question of, what kind of problems does base paint face, I think there's a little bit of a challenge in balancing the artists having a shared power in the canvas coming together. So just if we had, half of the contributors with 100 pixels to paint and then the other half with 10,000 pixels to paint, you kind of have this offset power dynamic, I suppose, or controlling power that's even smaller than the 100 people that are committing to the canvas. So sometimes I feel as though that could be a problem in the future that I don't think has necessarily become a problem yet, but just down the road, I worry a little bit about that. And then the other problem, I guess, really with a project like this is it's just interest. I don't think it would come, but I think it would cause a very big problem if people just stopped wanting to contribute. People stopped having interest in buying canvases. People stopped having interest in committing to a shared canvas, and it kind of just fizzled out. Kind of going a little bit full circle back to just talking about some other projects trying something similar to this in the early days and kind of not being around as prominently anymore. I think the same thing could happen with base paint. It's, a lot of this stuff is based off interest, but I think the formula is pretty well balanced with base paint so that it doesn't have those things happen. I don't think that's something that'll happen overnight by any means, but certainly a concern too that I think needs to be considered. And, the question of how do we sell more canvases to attract more artists to sell more canvases. It's kind of this circular thing a little bit. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't put a whole lot of thought. I'm kind of more in the line again with this being more of a hobby and not, my life's work by any means or a full time job, of just enjoying it as long as it lasts and just being grateful for the time I do have with it working and being enjoyable. Yeah, or do we just put up a wall and say, hey, that was it, 1,000 days of this thing? I think it's run its course and we really enjoyed it. We might try to do something a little different or improve it and bring it back. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, um, I personally hope it doesn't end on day 1,000. I'd love to see this thing go really forever. I mean, I think this is kind of one of those things that's it's cool because so much of it is code based that it really only takes two or three people to keep this thing going. In my opinion, sure, not a lot of canvases may be sold or not a lot of people might commit to the canvas, but there's really nothing that would necessarily stop it on day 1,000. So if it went through, a dark age, if you will, of very low activity, I think it would still be an interesting thing to see if it's affordable to sustain the website and whatever those types of pieces are. I'm not very savvy with that stuff. I wouldn't be against seeing a lower, slower time for the sake of letting it continue to go well past what its natural life might be, because these types of projects I think could very well have a resurgence years down the road that people just don't think about today too. I mean, so I don't know. Yeah, I would be sad to see it go at 1,000 just for the sake of it being an even and clean number to close things off on. But who knows? Future of base paint. I think something I really enjoy about the future of base paint is I'm like one of many people that help the project, but don't really dictate what the project does. And so I'm eager to see the project survive. But short of that, I am excited to see how a collaboration of 100 plus people come together to make it whatever it is, good, bad, uh, ugly, whatever. Um, I'm kind of here for it and kind of just enjoying the ride more so than trying to figure out or plan for what the next thing is going to be with it. So I'm yeah. If anything, I'm just looking forward to the project continuing to survive and giving me an opportunity to go somewhere every day to kind of look and appreciate some of the stuff people are doing in this relatively renovative or innovative space. There's something very powerful about getting creative people to work together on things like this and do it for kind of a shared purpose. And I just can't speak highly enough of all the different types of creative people that are willing to kind of come together and get criticized and publicly share their stuff and have their stuff altered. I mean, it's just such a cool experience um, to be a part of. So I've kind of already expressed my gratitude enough, but I am really grateful to have been lucky enough to kind of fall into this project in the way that I have, and happy to continue seeing it live and grow.